So natural law has been called many different things in different traditions throughout the world at different times in history. Let's look at what some people have called it. It's been called the law of cause and effect, or the laws of cause and effect. And there's a scientific connotation to this concept of cause and effect too. Even scientists will say an effect invariably follows a cause. And they'll also say things like, for every action, there exists an equal and opposing reaction. So there's a consequence when an action is taken. In the more New Age circles, you've heard it referred to as the law or laws of attraction. Okay? I call this presentation the real law of attraction. So, however, there are some good things that the New Age community, and I don't tell you it's all bad, I don't make that blanket statement, okay? It is a religion in many respects, but however, there are some truths embedded in it that can be taken on their own and, value can be gleaned from. So one of those sayings is, the energy that we emit is the energy that we attract. This is true. What we're putting out into the universe is what we're getting in return from the universe and what we're creating in our reality. Energy flows where attention goes. I just talked about this in the last section. What we put our attention on is what ultimately gets manifested in the world. As you think, feel, and act, so you shall be. Some of the teachers of different variants of law of attraction teachings have only put the first part in that. As you think, so you will be. No. As you think, feel, and act, so you will be. And most of all, as you act, so you will be. Most of all. Okay? So it's been called karma. It's been called moral law, as I talked about before. And this is, captured beautifully by the phrase, what we sow, we reap. The seeds that you scatter, that's what's going to grow, and that's the fruit that you're going to harvest. So a very accurate way of looking at it. Again, it's been called consequentialism. That's another thing I could put into this chart. In other words, that there is free will, but there is no free will without consequence. That's called consequentialism. That would be another very accurate way of referring to natural law. And finally, the golden rule, it's been called. Okay? And it's been stated in the affirmative as, do unto others as you would have done unto yourself. I find this much more powerfully stated in the negative, or what I call the apophatic variant. And we'll talk about what apophatic and apophasis means in a few moments. I think it would have been much less ambiguous, the golden rule, if it was said like this. Do not do to others as you would prefer not to have done unto you. Now the ambiguity goes away because people want to be treated slightly differently. Hey, a masochist might want to get beaten by a sadist. Okay? But that doesn't mean, do that to others because you like it. But people know what they don't want. They don't want their rights taken. They don't want their property taken or damaged. They don't want to be harmed in their person. They don't want any of those things. They don't want to be lied to. They don't want to be deceived. So don't do those things to other people. So let's jump into this is the heart of the presentation here. It's how natural law actually works in our lives. What are its expressions? How can we come to understand how this operates? There are ways of knowing, and they're through these expressions of natural law. So we defined what natural law is. We talked about the underlying principles that it's based upon. Now we are going to talk about how it works in our lives. Okay? So we're going to build a chart of the natural law expressions in a moment. What these expressions are the recognizable workings in our life. And they take place through 5 basic expressions. Each of the 5 expressions of natural law have a positive aspect and a negative aspect. So that gives us a total of 10 overall natural law expressions. And we're going to build a chart regarding these expressions. Okay? So here's the expression, and then there's a positive aspect to the expression, and there's a negative aspect to the expression. The first expression of natural law is known as, and again, this is what I call these things. There's no hard and fast rules. It's just terminology. It's jargon to try to explain them in words. Okay? These are unseen concepts and laws in reality, in nature, in the nature of the universe. Okay, these are just English word terms that I'm applying to these concepts, okay? So the first principle of natural law I call the generative polarity. Or in other words, this is the force or energy that we are using at the base level to start the process of creation. Or you could say of co-creation. Okay? We're co-creating the reality that we experience with the laws of nature. So you can look at the first first expression of natural law, which is the generative polarity, as the force that we use to set all of the other events which are to come, which are to manifest in our lives, into motion. Or in other words, what we use, the force that we use to generate or create the quality of our experience. That's the generative polarity. The positive expression of the generative polarity is love. Now, this is not what many people think of as love, okay? It's not familial love. It's not relationship love. It's not Hollywood movie variant of love. It's not romance novel variant of love, okay? I call love consciousness. Love is the force which helps us to expand consciousness and become open to truth if we are in it. If we are in that vibratory energy, we become open to truth. All right? So here's what it looks like visually. I try to put a visual aspect to all of these concepts, okay? And people would think I'm going to put two people together kissing or hugging or something like that, okay? Love is inside each individual if it's present, okay? It doesn't depend on any other person. You can express love with another person, and there's no problem with that. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. That's a great thing if it's present in your life. The capital L, capital O, capital V, capital E definition of love that I'm giving here is not that. It is this force that opens up our consciousness. It's the flowering expression of consciousness, okay? So how I word this is the positive aspect of the generative polarity, the first expression of natural law, is love. In regard to natural law, love should be seen as the expansive force for consciousness. It is the force which helps us to become open to truth and expand our awareness. That's the connotation that I'm giving for the concept called love here. Okay, that's the positive expression of the creative polarity. Now, the negative expression of the creative polarity is the exact opposite of love. So people will automatically think, well, that's hate. And it is not. Because the thing that puts consciousness in a box and prevents it from growing and keeps it where it's at is what? Fear. There it is. Fear. Fear is the basis for unconsciousness. You cannot be unconscious of anything in particular unless you fear it. Okay, that's what shuts consciousness down. And here's my visual for it. Fear. I don't want to look at that. That's too horrible for me to contemplate. That can't be true. I don't want that to be true. That's all fear. Okay? The negative aspect of the generative polarity is fear. Fear is the contractive force for consciousness. Fear is the force which influences us to become closed to the truth, and it is the force which ultimately shuts down our awareness. That's why so many people are unconscious, because they are fearful. They are fearful of the responsibility that comes with knowledge, and most of all, they are fearful of having to act based upon knowledge, because that requires courage. The second natural law expression is the initiating expression, what I call the initiating expression, just my term for it. Okay? The initiating expression is the first stage of tangible and recognizable results which we produce in our lives after we have, quote unquote, set the ball rolling, okay? Set the dynamic in motion by choosing between the generative polarities of either love or fear. All right? So, we choose love and something starts to happen. We become open to truth, right? Well, love is the expansive force for consciousness that opens our minds to the truth and awareness. So what do we gain as a result of accepting or existing in the vibratory energy called love? We gain knowledge, which is the acceptance of truth. Since love opens us up to truth, knowledge is its reception. It is the receiving of truth. We come to know, okay? So that's how it starts. I call this the initiating expression. Now, of course, there's a negative initiating expression if we are existing in the vibratory dynamic of fear. That would be the opposite of knowledge. What is it? Ignorance. Right. Okay, now, this is what I put forward as knowledge. This is my imagery for knowledge. Okay? That's a being who knows themselves. You know, and as the mystery traditions of Greece put forward at the Delphic Oracle, know the self and you will know the universe. In other words, know the microcosm and you will know the macrocosm. Know thyself. The positive aspect of this initiating expression is knowledge or the acceptance of truth. Knowledge positively influences the quality of our lives because it positively influences our decision-making processes that lead to understanding in every area of our lives. You want to know how something works and ultimately create something good? You have to have knowledge. You want to know how a car works? Keep it running in good order, you have to have knowledge. You want to know how a computer works? Keep it running in good order, you have to have knowledge. You want to know how the human psyche works and keep it running in good order so that conditions on earth manifest the way you want them to manifest? You got to have knowledge. Not getting out of this condition without learning. Learning is the key, it's the answer. Knowledge is the answer. And people don't want to hear that. They don't want to hear it. They want to think we're magically going to manifest the desired conditions that we say we want without learning a thing. It doesn't work that way. So again, the negative initiating expression is ignorance. Ignorance is the refusal of truth. It is the refusal to gain knowledge. Okay? Because we are in fear. So here's what I put as the image for ignorance. You know, the population that is hypnotized, that wants to keep paying attention to nonsense and trivialities, feed themselves tons of GMO food that is crap for the physiology, you know. Pay attention to distraction, entertainment, mainstream news and media, you know. It's all there to just shut the consciousness down and keep people in a depressed psychological state and keep them in a state of psychological infancy. The negative aspect of the initiating expression of natural law is ignorance, or the refusal of truth. Ignorance negatively influences the quality of our lives because it negatively influences these decision-making processes that lead to understanding in every area of our lives. If you're ignorant about how anything works, you can't create the desired condition. It's just not possible. It's important to remember, again, that ignorance should be distinguished from nescience, which means not knowing because necessary information is not present or was unattainable. Ignorance, on the other hand, means not knowing even though necessary information is present because that information has been willfully refused or disregarded. And again, to keep us in ignorance, they don't need to hide the information anymore because it's not hidden anymore. It's out. And once again, it's available at your fingertips for free if you have the desire to take it in. But now, the manipulation mechanism that is used is dissuade people from looking at it. Provide endless entertainment, provide endless amusement, provide endless distraction, and say there's nothing to any of that stuff. That's just some old crazy religion that you don't need to understand. It's no different than any other religion, believing that natural law exists. Okay? That's what people will insist on telling you. So people will be dissuaded from ever looking into it, and they'll disregard it of their own choice. Thomas Jefferson said that if a nation expects to be ignorant and free in a state of civilization, it expects what never was and never will be. Freedom and ignorance are antitheses of each other that can never coexist simultaneously. That is an impossibility in natural law. I'm going to put up a couple other quotes on ignorance. Samuel Adams said, "No people will tamely surrender their liberties, nor can any be easily subdued. When knowledge is diffused," that means it's everywhere present, "and virtue is preserved," meaning morality. On the contrary, when people are universally ignorant and debauched in their manners, meaning purely selfish and only worried about themselves, they will sink under their own weight without the aid of foreign invaders, meaning the society will turn inward on itself and collapse and destroy itself just based on the fact alone that the population is ignorant and they are ensconced in moral relativism and other forms of debauchery and just self-pleasure as their highest virtue, their highest desire. Socrates said that the only good is knowledge and the only evil is ignorance. And this is a quote I'd like to be remembered for. "Willful ignorance in the presence of knowledge is the measure of a bad person." And people will say that's extremely harsh. That's true. That doesn't make the statement untrue. The statement is true as well. It is a harsh statement. See, people in my family will ask me, why don't you have anything to do with me anymore? I've deliberately cut off many members of my own family. Okay? Because many members of my own family say, I know what's going on and I don't care. I don't intend to do a damn thing about it. I'm worried about me, myself, and mine, and I don't care what's happening in the world. Well, you know what that's called, folks? That's called a bad person. Let's not mince words. Let's not euphemize. Let's call it what it is. That's called a bad person. And I don't want anything to do with bad people in my personal life. I don't hang out with bad people. I try to surround myself with good people who care. Because they're co-creating wisely. Okay? I tell family members who I've cut off association with, because you do not care is what makes you a bad person. I don't want anything to do with you until you start caring about what's going on in the world. Then we could talk again. And I'll welcome you back with open arms and forgive you. But not until. You want to stay in that level of consciousness? I want nothing to do with you. I don't want to be around people like that. They're bad influences, and they do bring other people down. So I'll still put out the information. It's there any time for free that they want to go and engage it. And I tell them all, anytime you want to ask me and come over and engage directly with me, I'll make the time for you. But until you want to do that, until you develop that desire, I don't want to be in your presence. Okay? So maybe, I don't know if that's going to be effective. I don't know. And guess what? I don't care whether it's going to be effective, because I'm not going to surround myself with bad people until they decide I want to make myself a better person. Then I'll engage them and speak the truth to them. But until then, I'll put this out there for free, and they can engage it any time they want. But in my personal life, I can't make time for that. I don't have energy for that. I barely have energy for this. An anonymous quote, I believe this was from some internet forum. I don't know what the gentleman's name was, but it was a great quote. Ignorance is the root cause of all evil. And since only knowledge eradicates ignorance, it is our duty and moral obligation, there's that term, to educate ourselves as well as the masses around us. That's a moral obligation if you're in a position of knowledge. And once again, that's why I do what I do. I don't do it because I like people. Believe me, Barb will tell you how much I like people. I don't do it to make friends. I don't do it to make money. I do it because it's a moral obligation and for no other reason. I don't serve people. I serve truth. Truth is the force which I serve. And I bend the knee to no other. That's it. That's it. So great quote on ignorance there. Great few quotes on ignorance. Let's look at the next expression. The internal expression is what happens inside of us, very simply. So now, we've started creating with a polarity. Something has happened in the world, either acceptance of truth or refusal of truth. Now something's going to take place inside of us, right? So look, This level is that knowledge level, right? This is the base consciousness level. You could look at, that's the foundation. Remember that 4-block diagram, right? You could look at this, here's the foundation. This is the foundation that lies underneath the trivium, right? Okay? That's as deep as it gets. Consciousness or unconsciousness, love or fear. That's what everything is a choice about, between, right? Now here's that first block. Knowledge or lack thereof. Knowledge or ignorance, right? And you can see these polarities are like that concept of, the polarity aspect of the natural law principles, okay? There's one thing that's real, and then this is the illusion, okay? These are two aspects of the same thing. This is consciousness, and this is its lack. This is acceptance of truth, and this is the lack of that, okay? So it's the same thing, but opposite in degree, which is why they're the same expression. Now, what happened after knowledge or lack thereof? We went up to understanding, right? So that's what this level is. Understanding happens internally, right? It's an internal process, all right? So the positive aspect of the internal expression is when we come to understand through developing the knowledge and the acceptance of truth that we are sovereign. Sovereignty is the expression, the internal positive expression of natural law. Now, again, underneath these, in parentheses, I always put what I call these things, another name that I've given to these things, these concepts. I call sovereignty internal monarchy. Internal monarchy. Now, monarchy means one ruler. Mon means one, is a prefix for one, and archon in Greek means ruler or master. So, internally, we each need to master and rule ourselves. This is our kingdom that we get to rule and nowhere else. We don't get to rule over anybody else. Many people think they're the rulers of other people, but they're wrong. Each of us is a sovereign being. Sovereignty, as we're going to see, means that you're not owned by anyone else. No one else owns you if you're sovereign, okay? So here's my expression, my visualization for sovereignty, okay? Somebody who truly has the light. They have the light at their disposal. They're bathed in it. It's flowing within them, okay? And light has always been associated in different mystery traditions as knowledge. It's been a symbol that has represented knowledge. This is the person who has the knowledge and has gone through the decision-making and filtering processes with that knowledge to come to an internal understanding that they are a sovereign being. And I have news for everybody. Whether you know it or not, whether you are familiar with the term or not, every person here is a sovereign. And you can never not be. It is an impossibility for you ever to be non-sovereign. It cannot be done. It cannot be done in nature. Okay? Every single human being on this planet is a sovereign being. And we're going to look at what a sovereignty actually means. The positive aspect of the internal expression is sovereignty, or what I call internal monarchy, meaning one ruler within. Internal monarchy, one ruler within. As a state of consciousness, sovereignty means that one has unified the three aspects of their consciousness, such that there is no internal contradiction between one's thoughts, emotions, and actions. We become a being that as we think, so we feel, so we speak and act. And there's no contradiction between those. We're not torn apart from within in this state of internal opposition amongst our own consciousness. Okay? Moreover, let's break the word sovereign down. That's where we're going to come to the real meaning of the term. Sovereign is derived from the Latin adverb super. Super means above. See, in classical Latin, there's no V in classical Latin, right? There was no V character. Actually, if you wrote a V like that, it was a U, okay? And why a double U looks the way that it is. It's two V's, actually. But that sound was U in Latin, if you see a V. There's no V sound in classical Latin. It doesn't exist phonetically, all right? So this phonetic variation that we express as v or v in English, in Latin was P or B. It was represented by a P or a B. So what we're really seeing here is suver, okay? But it was pronounced in Latin super, like super. Well, what does super mean? Super, you're beyond, you're above and beyond, okay? It means above or beyond, that's what it means. A superman is one who's beyond an ordinary man, right? The Latin noun regnum comprises the second part of the etymological root of this word. Regnum, it comes from rex regis in Latin, or regis. It means king. So regnum was the king's rulership. Regnum means his reign. It's where the word reign comes from in English, regnum, in Latin. It means rulership or externally imposed control. Okay? Not control in the context, I'm going to control my emotions, I'm going to control my behavior. No. It means I'm going to control you externally by imposing my will over your will through coercion. That's the context of rulership or control that I'm talking about here. So put them together. Super regnum, sovereign, means above or beyond externally imposed rulership or control by another. That's what it means. Sovereign means not a subject to another being, like a king, like one who considers himself a king. And it means not a slave to someone who considers themselves your master. That's all sovereign means, folks. Not a slave. And why I say every single person here is a sovereign is because there is no such thing, never has been any such thing, and never will be any such thing as legitimacy to slavery. That has never existed, does not exist now, and never will exist. Slavery is an illegitimate concept. None of us are slaves. The condition of slavery has been imposed upon people, but it has never in history been legitimate, and it never will in history be legitimate. So there is no legitimacy to the concept of slavery, of the rightful rulership of another being through directly imposing your control through coercion. Doesn't exist. That's a big part of what natural law is about. We have to understand when we're saying this word, this is what is meant by sovereign, not a slave. Okay, we did a study where we asked people, are you a sovereign? Like 11% said yes. Maybe, I think it was 10 or 11%. Which I thought was almost encouraging, that 1 in 10 people knew that they were sovereign beings. It was amazing. But 90% of the human population doesn't feel that they're sovereign, doesn't know that they're sovereign. I'm telling you, it doesn't matter an iota whether you believe you are or not. I'm telling you it's an eternal truth that you are a sovereign and can never be non-sovereign. There is no such thing as someone else's legitimate rulership or ownership of you. Because there's no such thing to the legitimacy of slavery, and there never has been, and there never will be. So everyone is a sovereign. A sovereign is a monarch. Again, mon means one, and archon means ruler. So when people ask me, what kind of government do you want? I tell them I want anarchy, and I want monarchy. And they're like, how could you have those things simultaneously? Because if you have internal monarchy, you can have external anarchy. See, we need to have the rulership within, and we need to get rid of the rulership without. This is the kingdom we need to master, and we need to set aside the concept of mastery and slavery in the external domain, in the physical world. Sovereignty, a sovereign is a monarch, which means a single ruler who rules only the kingdom of self. Sovereignty is a state in which one controls one's own thoughts, emotions, and actions, and by bringing them into unity or non-contradiction or non-duality, attains mastery over one's own consciousness. Sovereignty could be considered the equivalent of true self-control, true self-mastery, true self-love, or true self-ownership. It's all of these things. And ultimately, it means not a slave. That's what has to be remembered above all else. Let's look at the negative internal expression for natural law, which is confusion. Now, confusion results when we are in ignorance. That's the emotional dynamic, the feeling that takes place within the individual. This is the lack of understanding. Confusion only happens in a lack of understanding. When we have not taken in knowledge, because we are afraid, we are in fear, okay? Ignorance results, and then confusion happens internally. So look, remember, here's the essence, that's the foundation. This is that first stage, that first building block that we called knowledge or lack thereof. Okay? This is the second building block that we called understanding or lack thereof. This is true understanding when truth has been taken in and accepted. And this is the lack of understanding. Now, in that state of lack of understanding, we're confused. So there's no rulership within. Inside of us, there's anarchy, which means the absence of ruler. Of a ruler, not the absence of rules, which I'm going to get into later. Anarchy means there's no ruler, no master. So if there's no master inwardly, we have a big problem, because that means there's no self-mastery, there's no self-control, there's no self-discipline, and ultimately, there's no self-love. And that results in an understanding that we don't truly own ourselves. It would result in the absence of self-ownership, which is what we're experiencing as a species. That other people believe they own other people. This is what I found as a picture representing confusion. Someone who doesn't know themselves. Doesn't know themselves, completely attached to a ego identity. Their whole mind is all wrapped up. I believe I'm this businessman. I believe I'm this banker. I believe I'm this lawyer. I believe I'm this doctor. And that's my identity, and if something goes wrong with that, there goes my identity. There's who I am down the drain, you know? So this negative aspect of the internal expression of natural law is confusion, or what I call internal anarchy, meaning no ruler within. Confusion is the state of mind in which the being is ruled by fear and ignorance. Confusion could be seen as internal opposition within one's own consciousness. In other words, being torn apart from within in such a way that one's own thoughts, emotions, and actions are in perpetual contradiction with each other. A thought, emotion, and action are not in alignment. As we think is not how we truly feel and is not how we act. There's total contradiction and separation, no unity amongst those three aspects of consciousness. That's confusion. The fourth expression of natural law is what happens externally in the macrocosm in society. When you have a bunch of people who are in either this dynamic within their own consciousness or a bunch of people who are in this dynamic in their own consciousness, a state results in the society at large, because the society at large is comprised of the aggregate quality of the individuals that comprise that society. All right? So if there's love present and knowledge has been taken in and it's been understood and we understand that we're sovereign and we're expressing self-ownership and self-mastery, what state manifests in society? Freedom. There it is. Freedom can only manifest when those preceding conditions are in place. It cannot magically manifest by any other means. If we say we want to be free, this is the path we have to take. Consciousness, acceptance of truth, and an understanding of our own sovereignty through self-mastery. It can't happen any other way. It's not possible. Okay? So, this is what the picture I chose for freedom. This is actually from the cover of probably one of the greatest books I think that's ever been penned by human hands. And I've read a whole lot of books in my life. And for me to say that, it's a high compliment. Okay? I think I'm a pretty good judge of books that can impart some wisdom to people. And I'm telling you, you need to read the book, The End of All Evil by Jeremy Locke, if you haven't already read it. This is one of the cover image from that book. Very rare book. To find it physically online, if you find it at a decent price, snatch it up and give it to other people or sell it to other people. Okay? I had a physical copy of this book. I lent it out, took off. Forgot who I lent it to. It happens, right? But this was a rare book. I think it was only pressed a couple thousand, and it was never repressed. So it's a single printing or something like that. Never repressed it. Now, you'll find that book for $150, $200 in some places, right? I finally found it at some foreign source online for like $20, $25 and jumped all over it, and I finally have a new physical copy of it. One of the books, along with Larkin Rose's book, The Most Dangerous Superstition, that if I had to tell you, destroy every other book on earth, it would be down to these two. You know what I mean? It's that much. They're that important. This is the cover image from that book, with chains being broken that were formerly holding the earth in captivity. I think it's a great image that represents what freedom is about. It's not about my freedom. It's about our freedom. It's about freedom for all beings. And guess what? Our, when I say that in relationship to the earth, doesn't just mean human beings. It means all beings, including the animal kingdom. So the positive aspect of the external expression is freedom, or what I call external anarchy, meaning externally there are no rulers. There is no condition of masters and slaves. Okay? So that's what anarchy actually means, the absence of slavery. That's what it really means. True freedom for all should be seen as the goal of spiritual development. Such a state can only manifest as a result of human society's adherence to natural law. Can only manifest. Not just will manifest. The only way it is possible for it to manifest is if we understand and adhere to natural law. Okay, so that's the positive external expression, what happens in society. Now, there's a negative external expression, and you can call it multiple things. You can call it totalitarianism. You could call it slavery. I term it simply control, externally imposed control. Okay, it doesn't mean, self-control. It means literally someone outside of your own being is trying to control you and own you. So yeah, a good way of looking at it would be slavery as well, because control leads to slavery. Control is what I call external monarchy, meaning there's a ruler from without that believes they do own you and wants to continue to own you as their subject or slave. And this manifests in things like the oncoming police state, which I wouldn't even say is oncoming, I would say it's here. Say we're already living in it. It's not something that's going to happen in the future. It's something that's happening in the present. People talk about it as something they're trying to avoid from happening. What makes people think it's not already happening? The negative aspect of the external expression of natural law is control, what I call external monarchy, one external ruler, the concentration of illusory power, in the hands of institutions like government. Control is the pathway to all forms of evil and destruction. It results when a society lives in direct opposition to natural law. The fifth and final expression for natural law, how it operates in our lives, is what I call the manifestation, or the result that we create. So again, here's the foundation for that little 4-part building, right? Here's the first block, knowledge or lack thereof. Here's the second block, understanding or lack thereof. Here's the third block, wisdom or lack thereof, which is why we're in a society that's completely based in control, because we're drowning in knowledge and having a lick of wisdom. or very, very little, I should say. Certainly not enough to go around, okay? That's the action stage or the wisdom stage, what happens externally, right? This is that top block. Remember the top white block that sat on top? We had the blue block at the bottom, then the red, then the green, and then the white block. This was the manifestation, the result that we create. Remember little question I put on the top of that white block? Who can tell me what it was? The manifestation. No, the manifestation was either order or chaos. What do we ultimately create? So the positive manifestation is order, or what we would call all the things we say we want. Manifested goodness. Everything being okay, not creating self-inflicted chaos or suffering. This would be, we get what we say we want to get. And there's requirements for that, and here they are. There's the requirements. You got to be in this vibratory energy of consciousness. You have to accept the truth and develop knowledge. You have to have an understanding that you're a sovereign being, and you have to work toward the manifestation of true freedom. Then you'll have all the things you say you want. Manifested goodness and order in your life. And that's the only path to it. I'm telling you, that's the only path to it. Blanket statement. The human mind has a hard time with blanket statements. Has a hard time with always, every, without exception. The ego doesn't want to hear that. Again, humanity's greatest fear may be that the truth is absolute. I would say an even greater fear it has is that the truth is singular. That there's no such thing as my truth, your truth, his truth, her truth, their truth. There's just the truth, and whether we align our perceptions to it or not. That's humanity's biggest fear. So this is what I viewed order as being like. Okay, we have beings that are actually full of the light, and they're working toward a world that is based in freedom, cooperation, knowledge, sovereignty, no control. Okay? It's what I call in some of my former presentations cooperative spiritual anarchy, which is the natural condition of humanity. The natural, meaning spiritual, natural condition of the human species that has been blocked from manifesting through mind control, indoctrination, fear-based, trauma-based methods. So that's what I call order. The positive manifestation, manifested goodness. It represents everything we say we want, and it only results when there is balance or justice. Justice comes about through adherence to natural law. Justice can only be present when truth has been accepted in our lives and our behavior has been brought into harmony with natural law. Cannot manifest any other way. That's the positive manifestation. The negative manifestation is the opposite of order, chaos. Chaos is manifested evil. I just put this as, complete disregard for other people, breakdown, me first. Knock everybody else down. Get what I want. Don't worry about anybody else being hurt. Don't worry about anybody else's freedom. Don't worry about whether anybody else's rights are being tread all over. Doesn't matter. Let me get mine. Self-preservation is the highest law. Survival is all that matters. Even if I have to step on somebody else to get it, to make that happen. Yeah, it's an animal. That's exactly right, sir. That's exactly correct. That's not a human being. That's an animal. That's how animals in the animal kingdom behave. And again, natural law doesn't work the same way for animals as it does for human beings because they do not have the same capacity for consciousness that a human being has. So let's not start saying that's the natural order. No, it is not. It's the exact antithesis of the natural order. The natural order is just that. Order. It's in the word. It's in the phrase. Natural order. What people are describing as the natural order through this utter nonsense concept called social Darwinism is, as I've called it before, psychopathic chaos. And break down that word. Psychopathology means an illness of the mind. Psychopathy is mental illness. Psyche in Greek means the mind. Okay? And pathology is an illness, sickness. Psychopaths are mentally ill. And they don't create anything resembling order. All they can create is chaos, which is why they want us to mimic their mindset, because they're just bent on hell and destruction to manifest, and they have to have our complicity and cooperation to make that dynamic happen. Our energy has to be given over to them by our mindset being made like theirs. Otherwise, their worldview can't come into manifestation, which is one of chaos and disorder. The negative manifestation, chaos, or manifested evil, is the exact opposite of what we say we want. Chaos results when there is imbalance and injustice, which results whenever there is ignorance of truth and behavior which is in direct opposition to natural law. So that's our chart, and one last thing I want to say about it is that the manifestations or the expressions of natural law are what I would call, they're unilateral. They don't cross into each other, okay? There's no such thing as, well, I've accepted the truth and I've developed knowledge, so now I'm in a state of confusion. It doesn't work like that. Okay? You can't go from ignorance to sovereignty, to the understanding that you're sovereign. You cannot cross the area of these charts. Once you're here, you can only go here. In order to get here, you got to come from here. In order to get here, you got to come from here, 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 and here. You don't get there from any of these. You don't get here from anything in this column. You don't get here from anything in this column. Okay? Please keep this in mind. These expressions are unilateral. Okay?
You can't skip.
No, they cannot be skipped either. Good question. They must proceed in order and in the same column of expression. So you can only get to order through freedom, which comes about through the understanding that we are sovereign, which comes about through taking in knowledge of truth, and which comes about through staying in a vibratory energy of love or higher consciousness. The openness to truth. That's it. Same thing here. We can only create chaos when our society is bent on control, okay? Because we are confused beings that don't understand our sovereignty and think other people can legitimately own us or rule us, and that comes from a place of ignorance or refusal of the truth, which is based in fear. Can only manifest that way. Blanket statement, too. And I will not retract on that blanket statement because this has nothing to do with what I think or feel or my beliefs. This is how laws operate in creation. Not a belief system, not a religion, has absolutely nothing to do. I did not develop this. I came to an understanding of it by seeking truth. I'm telling you, this is not my information, never has been my information, never will be my information. There's no copyright on it. I don't claim it. It's eternal truths that have existed forever and will exist forever, whether human beings are here or not. Take it and share it freely and widely to anybody that's capable of comprehending it, because it's the only way we're going to get out of this mess. Okay? Those are the expressions of natural law. Now, when I say living in harmony with natural law or living in opposition to natural law, what do I really mean? Well, what this has to do with is knowledge. And we're going to keep going back to this trend. This thread is not going away. Okay? And guess what? Every time I teach any of this stuff, whenever there's the new age community around or present, okay, and you'll encounter them from time to time, they'll insist, they'll even see it's like, you can tell knowledge is becoming a bad word to these people. No. When you say K-N-O-W, no, it's almost like they immediately have an avulsion, extreme negative reaction, and it is fear. But it's mind control, moreover, because they are being fed this poisonous untruth that there's not really any such thing as knowledge, and that knowledge is not the way out of this prison. And I'm telling you, it goes hand in hand with religious traditions because they want you to externalize your power, externalize everything. And I'm not telling you, I'm not saying don't have a model for behavior. And okay, this person, Buddha patterned it. You want to pattern your behavior on the Buddha's life? Great. Live the great life. You want to pattern your behavior on the life of Christ? Whatever. And again, I'm not getting into this discussion here today about the actual historicity of the man Jesus, regardless of what you believe regarding that. I understand I could write books on astrotheology, okay? I understand that being may never have existed in the way a lot of people believe he did. So what? Whether Siddhartha Gautama existed in the form of a man or not, or whether that's an allegory, who cares? Understand the spiritual teachings they were trying to convey to humanity and then apply them in your life. Live by that ethic, that code, and great, okay? And have whatever religious notion you want, okay? What I'm saying is what this religion called the New Age movement and what many official, organized, regional religions, okay, do is they try to take the emphasis off knowledge. Because again, if you're not seeking truth and trying to develop knowledge, that's how this information remains occult. And that's how the control system stays in place. They want you to externalize your power to a deity or a guru. Once you do that, you're accepting your chains. You're saying, I have no power. Let me tell you something, folks. I'm not powerless. I am full of power. Why? Because I have knowledge of how things actually work. Nobody can tell me that I'm owned by somebody else and can get me to believe it because I have understanding of my sovereignty. If they can take that away from you by getting you to de-emphasize the importance of knowledge, of self-knowledge, they own you. That's when you're owned at that point. Okay? Knowledge is the way out of this. Knowledge, understanding, and then converting that to true wisdom through actions. Not believing in something, not accepting everything, not waiting on somebody to come down and save you, whether it be Zoroaster or the aliens from Zeta Reticuli or Ashtar Command or Jesus Christ. Okay? You keep waiting on an external savior, you're going to be waiting in your chains forever. The knowledge of truth is what the Christ figure himself proclaimed would be the pathway to true freedom. Now, whether you put any emphasis on even exoteric Christianity, I'm telling you, that's the core of all the mystery traditions, is that until you take in the light, you'll never dispel the darkness. And the light is knowledge of truth. That's what it has always been symbolized as and represented as. Okay? Knowledge is the answer. And here's what the biggest piece of knowledge that comprises natural law needs to be understood. There is a difference. It is a 100% completely polarized antithesis. These are diametric opposites that exist in nature. These concepts, right and wrong, do not exist as constructs within the human mind. Anybody who believes that is thrown completely off the path. They are engaged in Satanism. Let me just say it just openly, right out, in a way that is completely unambiguous. If you believe there's no real difference between these things and that they do not exist in nature, you are accepting Satanism. It's a satanic belief system that comes directly from dark occultism. And once again, you could say whatever you want about believing that or not. I was a priest within this religion. So if you go up to a Jewish rabbi and you would expect he would have some knowledge of the Judaic tradition, would you not? If you went up to a Catholic priest, you would say, well, he has some knowledge of Catholicism and how it expresses the Christian tradition, would you not? If you go up to a Islamic what do they call them? Right. Would you expect that that this practitioner of his religion, who's in the priest class of his religion, would have some knowledge of Islam? Well, I'm telling you, I was a priest in Satanism. And I'm telling you, the concept of moral relativism is satanic belief. It is satanic ideology. It's it's their second tenet. They have 4 pillars. The 4 pillars of Satanism are self-preservation is the highest aspiration, and nothing comes above it. The second tenet is there is no such thing as the objective difference between right and wrong. Right is what's good for me, wrong is what's bad for me, personally. And that's it. And I get to make that up based on my likes, preferences, and whims. Okay? The third tenet is social Darwinism, which is an extension of macrobiological Darwinian theory. Okay? Social Darwinism, an oligarchy or a ruling class gets to direct the herd because we know better. And it's just our right to do so because our intellect makes us superior. And the fourth pillar is eugenics. Since we are ultimately God, since we decide what's real and what's not real, and we give that perception to the rest of the herd, and we get to decide what's right and wrong, well, we're God here. And therefore, we get to decide who lives and who dies. That's the 4 pillars of Satanism. And you know how many people believe that nonsense? A whole lot. Way more than people in the priest class of this religion, because they are propagating these tenets everywhere in human society. So many people are Satanists and do not even know that they are Satanists. It is a secret, infectious ideology. And I'll tell you a personal anecdote real quick. And I'll tell you who it is now, because I don't care anymore. My own grandmother. All right? Let's make it personal. All right? Okay? And I hope she sees it. My own grandmother, who I believe was in her late 70s or maybe early 80s at the time. Okay? I think she's in her mid-80s now. And I don't speak to her anymore. I took a printed sheet of paper that I printed out of my printer, printed it out of a laser printer, and I put a little piece of white tape. I taped a piece of white paper over the heading, the title of the document. And I asked her to read this. It had 4 paragraphs, right? And the paragraphs described each of the tenets of Satanism, very briefly. Self-preservation is the highest law, etc., etc. Moral relativism is what we believe in. Social Darwinism is what we believe in. And we believe in eugenics. Okay? She said to me, well, I pretty much agree with everything that's written there. And I said, you do? And she said, yeah, that's how I think. I don't see anything really wrong with it or bad with it. I said, okay. I said, peel that little strip of paper off that I've taped to the top. I want you to see what the document's called. And on top it said, the tenets of modern Satanism. And you know what her response was? Well, then I guess that makes me a Satanist, doesn't it? Not horrified. Not, oh my God, what is my belief system? What do I believe in? No. Well, guess that makes me a Satanist, doesn't it? As if it was just no big thing. And you know what? You know how many people are in that mindset? Hundreds of millions, if not billions, and don't even understand what it is. Because they think Satanism is something that it is not. They don't understand what the ideology of Satanism is. They think you have to be associated with the trappings of Satanism, okay? That you have to dress like, as if there's such a thing as dressing like a Satanist. Or you have to have certain things on your walls in your house or in your garage if you're a Satanist. Well, let me tell you something. Satanists are the owners of banks. They own hospitals. They own schools. Okay? Yeah. Certainly that university right across the road. And many people ascribe to this religion in their thoughts, emotions, and actions, and do not even understand it because they don't even understand what that belief system is about. They don't understand what that ideology is. They don't know its tenets. So, again, going back to this, if you don't know that there is an objective, meaning in nature difference, okay, between right and wrong, that is a satanic belief system. Morality, it's not right versus left. It's about right versus wrong. This whole left-right paradigm that people are, you fall in with the left, with the Democrats, or the right, the Republicans, has nothing to do with any of that. It's a false paradigm. The thing that all of that's a distraction for not getting you to pay attention to and understand is the difference, the real, true, and objective difference between right and wrong. And we're going to explore what that is, because it can be known. It can be known, and most people will be shocked and horrified to understand the real differences between right and wrong, because they'll have to look into themselves and recognize in many ways that they are cooperating with wrong, and that they don't really truly know the difference between right and wrong. When you tell people this, I'm telling you, I told this to somebody in a bar once, which was a big mistake of even trying to bring up this discussion in that environment. But occasionally I even, make asinine mistakes like that and think I'm going to be talking to even a semi-conscious being when you're talking to a block. Okay? So I said, you understand what actual morality is true common sense. We're going to look at that term, common sense, and explore what it really means. And she said, so what you're saying is if I think that there's no really objective right and wrong, that I don't have common sense. And I said, yes, that's what it, no, I said, that's not what I think. I'm trying to explain to you that's what it means by definition, not by what I think. The definition of common sense is to truly know the difference between right and wrong. And I said, because I say that you are not fully in that state of awareness, don't even take it personally, because billions of people on the earth are in that same state of awareness. You're not special, and it's not a personal attack against you. And I thought this person was going to throw a glass at me. Literally got so enraged because she's associating the concept of common sense with that you are functional and can adequately perform the daily activities of living. And that's not what I'm talking about as common sense, okay? Having common sense about, I can prepare my meals and eat for myself and wash my own clothes and, go to work. That's not what I'm talking about as common sense. That's your everyman's definition or connotation of common sense. We're going to talk about what common sense really is. Okay? A deep understanding of morality, which are the principles concerning the distinction between right and wrong behavior, lies at the very heart of natural law. This is the essence of it, folks, right here. And here's the difference between right and wrong in a nutshell, about as simply as I am capable of describing it. All right? Now, we use the words correct or right to mean correct and moral. When you say, okay, what's 5 plus 5? It's 10. You're right. Meaning you are correct. That is true. That is the correct answer. That is right. Okay? And then we say, was stealing that money from Jim, was that right? To mean, was it a moral behavior? So now, why would we use the same word, again, like the ancient Romans used the same word, book and free? Okay, those two different concepts were represented by the same word, liber, right? And there's a reason, because reading will put you on the path to true freedom if you read the right books. Okay? Why would in the English language, we have other words to mean the same concepts, but the word right means two things simultaneously. It means both correct and it means moral. There's a reason, because they mean the same thing. Correct is moral. Correct meaning that it is in alignment with that which is true, means literally by definition, if it is true, then it is moral. The more you are following something that is false, that is not based in truth, the more you are going down the path of immorality, of wrongdoing. So we have to come to know what is true regarding right and wrong, if we are going to be able to correctly, with wisdom, choose between these two modalities of behavior. So, right, again, it means both correct, which is based in truth, and moral, which means that the action, if taken, if acted upon, is in harmony with natural law. Actions based in it do not result in harm to other sentient beings. That's the definition of right. Now look at how simple that definition is. And think about it for a moment. We're talking about what is a right. Meaning, what do you have a right to do? And what you have a right to do is no different than what I have a right to do. What I'm telling you here is every single human being on this planet has the exact same rights. Not one person has one more right than another being. Not one person has one less right than another being. To think that anybody has more or less rights anywhere on the earth at any time in history is a fallacy. It is a lie. It is a deception. It is wrong. It is not correct. It is not based in truth. Rights are universal and the exact same for every human being. Blanket statement, absolute truth. Let the ego chew on it and deal with it. Okay? And again, the ego will have a hard time with this in many cases, with many people. They'll hear that and they'll want to throw a glass at me. So, look at the definition again. A right. So, when you make a definition, right, this is a noun. Right? Noun's a person, place, or thing in the English language. We're talking about a noun here. You look up the word right, it's a noun, meaning a right. A right that we have to enact, to take, is an action. You have to start a definition with the same type of word. You're defining a noun, you got to give it a noun to start the definition. A right is an action. Most people will never even be able to tell you that. Just say, can you define what a right is to me? They will not give you this noun. A right is an action. So is a wrong an action. A right is an action that if you take it, it does not cause harm to other sentient beings. That's the simple and easiest definition that anybody can give for what a right is. And I guarantee you, you go and engage as many people as you want on the street. I have not asked this question and had anybody ever raise their hand or even contact me later and say, you go up to somebody on the street and ask them if they could define what a right is. Nobody can give you the correct definition for what a right is. Now, if you don't know what the definition of a right is, you certainly don't know whether you're choosing accurately between a right and a wrong, between right and wrong behavior. You can't. It's not possible. So many people believe that they're allowed and they can do actions with no consequence that actually aren't in alignment with natural law because the taking of those actions do result in harm. And they don't really even understand that. So let's look at what a wrong is. We're going to deeply look into what a wrong is. We're going to focus on what wrongs are. Because in reality, to even start this, right, what have we based this definition on? Actions based in it do not result in harm, right? That's the negative of another definition. Well, it's the negative of this definition. So you can only actually define a right by knowing what a wrong is. A right technically cannot be defined outside of the negative. A right can only be defined apophatically, meaning understanding what a wrong is and then stating that it is anything that falls outside of the parameters of wrongdoing. Okay, and we're going to get to what those parameters are. All right? So, I'm sorry, I want to focus on wrong for a moment. Okay? Wrong, again, we say this, what's 5 plus 5? 9. Wrong, it's not true. Incorrect. Incorrect answer. It's not based in truth. We use the term wrong to mean both incorrect and immoral. Well, that was wrong what you did to that person by hitting him for no reason. You didn't have the right to do that. Immoral means in opposition to natural law. Because actions that are based in it result in harm to other sentient beings. That's the simple definition of a wrong. Now we can go deeper into the definition of what a wrong is and look at different types of wrongs, which is what I'm going to do in a moment. So this is the concept that is referred to as apophatic inquiry. Very, very critical to understand concept. And you have to apply this concept. What this essentially is it's a filtration process. This is the process of the middle process in the trivium. Okay? It's weeding through the inconsistencies and saying, well, is this inconsistent? Is this inconsistent? Is that not true? And you're setting those behaviors aside and you're saying, here's the behaviors that are wrong. Don't engage in those behaviors. It's negative. It's a negative process. It's a destructive process. You're taking away from the body of everything that can be done, and you're saying, I'm pulling all of these out through a weeding down process and saying, these are all inconsistent with truth. It's called apophasis. Apophatic inquiry. And that is to be delineated from what's known as cataphatic inquiry. Cataphatic inquiry means you're reasoning in the affirmative, and you're not trying to weed down through a process of elimination to get to the truth. Okay, so cataphasis or cataphatic inquiry would be equivalent to inductive reasoning, whereas apophatic inquiry or apophasis would be akin to deductive reasoning. All right? Rights are most easily understood when they are considered through apophatic inquiry, or what is known as the process of apophasis. This process helps us to understand what a right actually is by understanding which actions are not rights because they cause harm to others. They're the cause of harm. Here's what apophasis is. It's been called apophatic inquiry. Okay? Really look this up. Understand what apophasis is because it's part of the trivium process. All right? It comes from the Greek noun apophasis, written there in Greek script, which comes from the Greek verb apophani. Okay, so apo in Greek means away from or the negation of, and phanai in Greek means to say or to speak. So when we put them together, it means to say no or not to say, or to say what something is not, in other words. That's what apophasis is. You're saying this is not this. It's the opposite of that. Okay? So it is a method of logical reasoning or deductive reasoning that is employed when you are given a limited set of possibilities in order to arrive at knowledge by way of the exclusion of known negatives. You're setting the logical inconsistencies to the side and saying, this is not what this thing is. That's called apophasis. Okay? You are describing what something is by explaining what it is not. This is called affirmation through negation, is another term that this truth discovery process is known as. Okay? So, what we're going to do is apophasis. We're going to do apophatic inquiry regarding right and wrong. So, what is not a right? What are ways that people can cause harm to other people or animals? Ways that we can cause harm to other sentient beings. One of the first thing, so what we're doing here is we're going to list the boundary conditions for natural law here, for breaking natural law. If we take these actions, we are breaking natural law because the action is a cause which results in the effect of harm to another being. All right? So these are what are simply, I call them the natural law transgressions, which means sins or wrongdoings. They're simply harmful actions that a person is capable of taking to another being, against another being. That's all. So of course, many people will get the first one. What's one of the main horrible, wrong things that somebody can do to another person? Kill them. Murder them. Take their life. Okay? Murder. And I would distinguish murder from killing as well. Because occasionally, to defend oneself, killing may be necessary. But murder is always immoral and wrong. Okay? See, the fifth commandment in Hebrew, do you know what it says in Hebrew? It does not say thou shalt not kill. The term for murder in Hebrew is tirzach. The fifth commandment in Hebrew is lo tirzach, which means do not murder. Murder as a verb in Hebrew is a completely different word and a totally different connotation than the verb to kill. Because what they're saying is, don't take life without any right to take it. Meaning that you initiated the violence. And that's what murder is. It's the initiation of the taking of somebody else's life when you had absolutely no right to take that life. Now, if someone is coming after you, your rights, there may be times when you do have to take defensive action and forceful action up to and including deadly force. We're going to talk about that later. But murder is the first natural law transgression. And if you want to go down to a subsection of this transgression, you could list it as a totally separate wrongdoing. I'm keeping it in the same basic category. Assault, meaning you're directly physically accosting without right the well-being, the bodily well-being of another being, is also, it's like it would be, you could consider it attempted murder. Because assault is something that you do without right. If someone assaults somebody, they have no right to commit assault. Never exists. The right to commit assault does not exist. The right to commit murder does not exist in any circumstance, ever. Blanket statement. The right to defend oneself through physical force exists, and possibly in certain circumstances, the right to kill exists. But murder and assault can never be rights, because they always are done by being initiated without the right to do so. It is the initiation of violence. All right? Rape is the second natural law transgression. Okay? You're coercing the free will of another person and making them sexually associate with whom they wish not to. That's rape. And it's always wrong. Blanket statement. All right? The third natural law transgression is theft. It is the taking of property that does not belong to you. Someone else, got that property through lawful means without hurting somebody else. That's their property for as long as they are using it and being responsible for it. And you don't have a right to just take what doesn't belong to you. Nobody has a right to take my projector or my remote control or my computer any more than I would have the right to take Richard's cameras. Okay? It would be theft of somebody else's property. It's not mine. And this is the problem. We don't understand property. As we're going to get to, all rights are property rights. We'll get to that in a moment. That's the third natural law transgression. The fourth is trespass. And that means going into somebody else's lair that they are using, that they own lawfully and that they're responsible for, without their permission or consent, and you're just invading their privacy and their space, and you're taking their security away from them in that process. And we do have a right to set aside a place for ourselves for our own lair. Okay? And to violate that is to trespass against somebody else in their own property. The fifth and last natural law transgression is coercion. This is forcing somebody through the threat of violence to have their will comply with your will, whether they don't wish that to be the case or not. Making somebody do something that is against their will. Coercing them. And that's also not a right. Now, that's a small list. Very small list, right? We could add one more. We could add lying. Lying is also a wrongdoing. And I would consider that a theft of truth or a withholding of truth that somebody needs to understand to make accurate, informed decisions, lying to them. Okay? But essentially, these five are the overarching natural law transgressions. I challenge anybody to come up with a wrongdoing that doesn't fit into one of these categories. So far, I've never had one person able to do it. Any wrongdoing, any action that you could think of that doesn't fall into one of these wrongdoings. Yep. I would probably categorize it as pure ignorance, but I would say, hey, maybe you could look at it like that because that's propagating the slavery system indirectly. So, you're actually, you're not doing anything to help anybody else's freedom, certainly. I don't know if I would categorize that as a natural law transgression because, it's giving consent and propping up that system. It's not technically what I would call an action, but it's more of like giving consent. Hey, you could say that is a wrongdoing, I guess, because giving your consent is tacitly saying yes to control, and that's ultimately affecting everybody else's freedom negatively. So, possibly. But in general, what I would say is if you could think of an actual physical action that doesn't fall into one of those categories, let me know, because that's a pretty comprehensive list, and it's only like, 6 words. So, now, what if I told you I could narrow it down? What if I told you I can get rid of 5 of those words and take it down to 1? Okay? These are the wrongdoings. Let's try to narrow it down, right? Okay? Every harmful action that a human being is capable of taking is a form of theft. Now, many people will hear that for the first time. I've never heard that said. There is no action that you can take that causes harm to another person that is not a form of theft in some form or fashion. I challenge anybody to come up with an action that isn't a form of theft, that is an action that is a wrongdoing that isn't a form of theft. You won't be able to do it. I put that challenge out on my podcast. Say, email me if you know. No, not one person. The only one person challenged it and tried to say lying. I say, okay, that's really taking the truth from somebody, thieving truth. And whether you want to look at it as you're simply dissuading them from looking at the truth too, deceiving them, or not offering correct information, still you're taking away their ability to make correct judgments based on the availability of information. So it is a form of theft. Some form of property. Now look at that word. Property. Proper, meaning right, is always being stolen when a wrongdoing is committed. All rights are property rights. All wrongs are theft of property. Once again, I challenge anybody. It's an open challenge. If you can find me a right that is not a property right or a wrong that is not the theft of some form of property, please do it. Please let me know. Okay? Life is a form of property. So taking life you had no right to take, murder, is stealing property that wasn't your own because that was that person's life, possessive. They own it. And I didn't have a right to just go and take it for no reason. Rights are a form of property, meaning actions that you may do because they are in harmony with natural law and do not cause harm to others. I don't have a right to stop you from taking. If you're not harming somebody else, nobody has a right to stop you from taking an action. You may perform any action which does not directly result in harm to somebody else. Okay? Rights are a form of property. Freedom is a form of property. Somebody doesn't have a right to take somebody else's freedom and hold them against their will just because they don't like what they're doing. They have a distaste for what they're doing. Or they want them to comply with their behavior, with their commands. Okay? They want them to make their behavior comply with commands that they're being given. So, if you really break it down, let's look at the wrongdoings once again. Murder. Is that not the taking of somebody else's life? Assault is the taking of their right to remain unharmed in their person. You're taking their health if you assault them, right? Their homeostasis in their body is being put under assault. And that's robbery. That's somebody taking something that isn't theirs to take. Rape. You're taking somebody else's free will to sexually associate with whom they choose to sexually associate. And therefore that's a property theft. Because that's their property, their free will. Theft itself says it right there. You're taking physical possessions that aren't yours to take from somebody else. Stealing. Trespass. You are taking someone's security in their own lair, as we talked about, which you don't have a right to take. That's also their property. Coercion. What are you taking? Somebody else's free will, which isn't yours to take. That's a gift from the Creator, which belongs to each individual. And if somebody's coercing somebody by telling them, you must do this because I said so, and if you don't do this, I will come and do some form of harm to you, that's not a right. That's a wrongdoing, coercion. And it's a form of theft. Exactly. Sure. You must buy this. Imagine this. Great. We're going to take 5 more minutes, and then we're going to take an hour and 15-minute break. So all of these things are forms of wrongdoing, and they're all ultimately one wrongdoing in different forms. They are all theft, every one of them. There is only one wrongdoing. There's only one way anybody can wrong anybody else. Stealing. That's it. Every form of wrongdoing is a form of theft against another being and their property. A living being or their property must have been harmed in order for a violation of natural law or wrongdoing to have taken place. Any action which does not cause such harm is a right. There's the apophatic definition of a right. Through understanding what a wrongdoing is. And I'm telling you, billions of people, not millions, not hundreds of millions, billions of people on this planet do not know this. Could not tell you this. Because this is it. This is it, folks, right here. This is the crux of natural law. What is a right? What is a wrong? And I couldn't sleep last night. After we got home, I never had problems sleeping. Ever. Ever. I'm just going to tell you this before we break. I was laying in bed last night before I went to sleep for the night. Could not sleep because all I was thinking of is how preposterous. I told this to some people at lunch. I'm just sitting there thinking about how preposterous and ridiculous it is for me to even ever have to utter any of this. The fact that this is not 100% pure common sense knowledge on the earth is so abominably preposterous to me that all I was sitting there thinking is, how could I be going out and explaining this to people? This is what I must do? Me, though. It was almost like schizophrenic in a way. Because I was just thinking, I was waking up and then falling back to sleep and waking up thinking, where am I? Why am I here? And I'm the person who's coming out and doing this. And it's just so absurd and ridiculous to me. Some punk from South Philadelphia taking in the knowledge of the mystery traditions and teaching them to people. Me. It's the most ridiculous thing. I can't even imagine it, you know? I still can't. I can't imagine that it's necessary, you know? That's the position that our society is in. It's so profoundly sad that I can't believe it. And unless we deeply start to understand this and propagate this knowledge to other people, things are going to get worse and worse and worse and worse. And there's no reason for it. There's no reason to go down that path. We want to choose the way of maximum pain because we don't want to give up thoughts that we're addicted to just because the pattern has been there for as long as we can remember. We would rather go down the path to the grave and the abyss rather than admit we were wrong and just say, I need to give up this negative way of thinking. You know? I'm going to leave it right there and just say the bottom line to what this section comes down to is if someone hasn't been harmed, no wrongdoing has been committed. No victim, no crime, in other words. Many people insist, there doesn't have to be a victim for there to be a crime committed. You know how many people are rotting away in a jail cell right now as we speak who have never harmed another living being? You know how many people? Tens of thousands. Okay? And no one has any right to hold them. Unless you've harmed somebody else, nobody has a right to stop you from continuing to take the action that you are taking. Okay? We're going to talk about some of those things in the last section. So let's take an hour and 15-minute break, and we'll be back here at about 5:20.